Hi, my name is Sarah Perschbacher. I'm a graduate student at IU in the Masters of Liberal Studies program, and today I'm going to talk to you about the international views on GMOs. During the course of my research on biotechnology in our food system, I have been looking at what factors produce the public acceptance of GMOs. So to begin, we're going to look at these two images here, and they really frame the debate of what's happening surrounding genetically modified organisms. The one image you see protesters out picketing, protesting, saying no, they're GMOs. They want to know what's in our food system. And then on the other image, you see what the biotechnology corporations are offering. You have two hands here, and they're both holding rice, and there is a visual difference between the rice, but there is a genetic difference. The yellow rice is called golden rice, and it was genetically engineered to produce and contain more vitamin A. By containing more vitamin A, that would help offset a lot of the deficiency that these developing countries are experiencing. So today I'm going to give you a definition of genetically modified organisms. We're going to look at some global figures, and then we're going to look at each area here in Europe, China, Egypt, and the United States, and just kind of look at what are the differences and what produces a positive or a negative opinion here of GMOs. And then we'll conclude by looking at the future of GMOs. A genetically modified organism is an organism whose genetic material has been altered by the means of genetic engineering. It is different from traditional breeding techniques. It is different from cross-hybridization. It allows a scientist to choose specific traits and insert those traits into another organism. So one example of a GMO crop is Bt corn. Bt is a soil bacteria that produces toxins that kill many pests that feed on corn. In the Bt corn, they take the Bt gene, place it into the corn genome, and then there that Bt is duplicated, and then it is put into the corn cells, which then allows the corn to produce that toxin when the pain. In 1996, biotechnology released genetically modified seeds into the food system for commercialization. There were 6 countries that began to grow GMO crops, and now today there is 27 countries. So it's a huge increase in 18 years. Today you can see these countries in the green, they're the ones that are growing GMOs, and in the orange, those are the countries that are importing GMOs. Today, the United States grows 70.1 million hectares of GMO crops. China only grows 4.2. Egypt grows 700 hectares, and Spain grows 22,000 hectares of GMO crops. So we're going to look at why these figures vary and how public acceptance also contributes to GMO planting. European countries plant a very small percentage of GMO crops. Spain does plant 22,000 hectares of Bt corn, which is used for animal feed only, while France does not allow GMO crops to be planted. It's interesting that in the mid-1990s, the European governments supported bringing GMOs into their food system. The public opinion was positive. GMOs had high hopes to revitalize the economic situation that was happening in Europe at the time. But due to several food scares with the growth hormone in milk and mad cow disease, that public opinion turned to negative. As the media continued to cover these outbreaks and these scares, the social trust was heavily affected, and that really allowed for the public to view biotechnology cautiously and fearfully. So due to these fears, the European Commission did establish some regulations in 1997, which did include labeling GMOs. And so today, people know what is in their food there. They know if GMOs are present, but again, most of the GMOs that are being imported are for animal feed only. China grows 4.2 million hectares of GMO crops. Introduced in 1996, the Chinese government wanted to convey and create a positive message of biotechnology in their food system. And they were able to do that through their state-ran media. But they were also able to do that through the farmers. Farmers saw the benefits immediately from the Monsanto BT corn seeds in the test fields, and the farmers pirated those seeds, which resulted in cross-hybridization and again increased the popularity of BT cotton. Due to the technology, the cotton bollworm reduced from 90% between the years of 1997 and 2006. So again, that contributed to another positive reinforcement for biotechnology in the food system in China. It's interesting, though, that China does require labeling for all genetically modified goods. Unlike Europe and China, Egypt has a relatively small agricultural space, but they do grow 700 hectares of BT corn. In 2008, they were the first Arab country to plant GMOs. Prior to the release of the GMOs, the Egyptian government, constructed positive images and messages to ensure that the public opinion on GMOs would remain positive. The government focused their images on drought-tolerant crops and pest reduction. And they do not currently have a labeling system. So globally, the United States is the largest producer of GMO crops, growing more than 70 million hectares each year. In 1996, the United States introduced genetically modified into the food system, and today many of the biotechnology headquarters are found to be in the United States. Unlike Europe, China, and Egypt, the United States has not constructed a public opinion about GMOs through government outlets or media outlets. It's interesting that GMOs have entered our food system so quietly and so almost unknowing to the general consumer. One of the reasons for that is the FDA has constructed a definition about GMOs. They say that genetically modified food and conventional crops are essentially equivalent. And this definition, although as we saw in the second slide, that there is a difference between the two crops, has allowed the government not to regulate or require labeling of GMOs in the food system. Now, currently we see, due to a small grassroots movement of talking about GMOs and bringing it to the forefront of the public knowledge, we see certain companies beginning to voluntarily label, but as a whole, we have not seen a national movement to regulate or require labeling of GMOs. So by looking at all these areas, we see that there are many factors that go into a public or negative opinion of GMOs. And there are many concerns still about GMOs, especially in Europe and Egypt, but also extending to the entire African continent. You know, there's a lot of concerns about regulations. Are we really able to regulate these crops? Do we really know enough about these crops and how they can affect our food system? And then the advantages of GMOs that we've seen in have been constructed by positive media messages of China and Egypt, you know, and the Chinese government making sure that they're supporting their interest by communicating a positive image. And then in the United States, we see very much so crop security, and we see that these GMOs are able to deliver to farmers a seed that is drought, pest, and disease resistant. Not only is this ensuring the farmer that's going to have an increased yield, but it's also going to provide that crop security and a higher profit margin. Since 1996, there has been an increase in countries growing genetically modified crops and also an increase in acreage planted of genetically modified crops. And I believe that this increase is going to continue each year with more countries, more acreage. I think one way to create a positive image for genetically modified crops and positive acceptance is through labeling. And as you can see by this map, you can see the countries here in orange that require labeling, The ones in white do not. And it's interesting, as the largest producer of genetically modified crops, the United States does not require any labeling. And how will that change in the future? Is these grassroots organizations, are they going to be able to unify and get legislation pushed through so that we can be like the rest of the world, making sure that we are labeling, ensuring that our crops are safe, just not for ourselves, but for this global food system that we live in?